Shalom. This is about Parashat Trumah. It follows Parashat Mishpatim, which follows Parashat Yitro. Yitro had the 10 Commandments. Mishpatim had about 50 commandments of all kinds of natures about civil and criminal law. So what happens in Trumah? Well, Trumah is the first of the portions which details what has to go into the construction of the portable tabernacle that was the main religious space for the Israelites in the journey in the desert. It has all the particular kind of materials and the orders for instruction. And then after that, the next week comes the sin of the golden calf, followed by the portion which talks about the actual implementation of the tabernacle. Now, there are several questions here. One is a debate among the rabbis as to whether chronologically the order to build the tabernacle and the materials came before or after the sin of the golden calf. Now, it occurs earlier in the Torah, but there's a principle of Rashi that says that just because something comes earlier in the Torah doesn't mean it happened earlier in timeline. And the argument goes like this. For those who think that God had originally the plan that the Israelites should have a prayer space, then the order as it appears in the Torah is the correct order. First came the order to get the materials together to build the tabernacle, and then came the sin of the golden calf. Others say no, God originally wanted a religion that was purely monotheistic with no physical space, but the sin of the golden calf, where Israel worships an idol, reminds God or informed God, or God understood, or God revealed to God's self that now a prayer space was necessary, that you can't have a religion that's so purely spiritual it doesn't have anything tangible. And therefore, it was an antidote to the disease of the golden calf. You have both of those issues among the rabbis. Now, where did they get the stuff? Well, it said when they left Egypt that they took stuff from the Egyptians as compensation for the slavery. But it's interesting, they weren't allowed to keep it. They had to give it then for the spiritual purpose of the tabernacle. There's a beautiful verse there in that portion early on in Terumah, which says, build me a tabernacle, v'shachanti b'tocham. Build me a tabernacle, and I will, v'shachanti, and I will dwell. That's where the idea of the Shekhinah, the divine presence of God, comes from. B'tocham, among them. Not b'tocho, in it. In other words, clearly saying God is not going to dwell in this building. This is not a house of God like the pagans might say. Rather, God is going to dwell among the Israelite people, and his presence will be manifest as the Shekhinah because they build this tabernacle which will make them feel more spiritual and more holy. It's not that the place has intrinsic holiness, but that people invested its spiritual significance, and therefore they feel more divinely, they feel more spiritually, and therefore they will draw God into them in a more substantial way. In addition to that, the tabernacle had an element of people had to giving voluntary donations. There was a tax later we read about in Parashat Kitisa, where people had to give a tax of a half a shekel to maintain it, but these were gifts of one's heart. Now, probably scholars believe that all these materials, which are unlikely to be found in the desert, and perhaps unlikely to be found in Egypt, were things, the materials that Jews had hundreds of years later when the text was actually written, and they read back into the story those items. Be that as it may, we have what is one of the greatest manifestations of tangible religion in the world, prayer houses, and its origin comes from this Torah passage where God says in Parashat Trumah to build me this gift, build me this house. Now, what did it consist of? It had two major, in a courtyard, and it was portable, remember. The Levites had to take it down, put it up whenever they traveled, so it had to be portable. They had two major sections. They had the courtyard where the altar was, where they did the sacrifices and the people were. And then they had another section which consisted of the holies and the Kodesh Kodoshim, the Holy of Holies. And there was a curtain dividing them. In fact, the parochet, which is the curtain we have in front of the ark, which holds our Torahs today, is reminiscent of that. Most of what we have on the Bima today, and including the Ner Tamid, the ark, the Torahs, are reminiscent of the descriptions of what went on there. They had an ark, they had a table with showbread, they had the candelabra, they had the altar. But today we read the Torah on the table. Instead, all of those things stem from the storyline described in Parashat Trumah. So that's a little bit of what we're going to be studying the week of Parashat Trumah. And the root word of Trumah is from the word, like the camp I went to was called Ramah, high places.